Part 1 is video number 037. I got early on that there was no way I was going to be able to do this by myself. These are some of my new friends that I happen to have pictures of. There's also no way I could have done this without a sufficient shop. That's a drill press, and this is the all-important scrap pile. A lot of work was done beside the boat on sawhorses, or under the boat also on sawhorses, and a lot just on the ground. Since I had no experience, I wanted to start with a small project in a place that wouldn't be too visible. This is really a design flaw on the inside of both hulls. Even the lightest of winds and the tiniest of waves would get trapped in this triangular area and create a hull slapping sound that could be heard throughout the boat. It drove me crazy. Other people had fixed this problem by adding a wedge in there, and I wanted to do the same. This is a shot partway through the project. I'm with one of my mentors. So the things that I had to figure out was, do you use a flap disc sander or a random orbital sander or a hand sander? And how much do you take off to prepare the surface? Once I've got the surface prepared, what do I fill it with? Is it going to be with styrofoam or floral kind of foam or surfboard foam? And then once I've got the material, how do I shape it to the form that I want? Should I be using a hot knife or a surf form blade or file or sandpaper? I'm not sure what. Then there are different kind of resins. Do you want to use vinyl ester resin, polyester resin, or epoxy? Then I had questions on how much of the white powder, which is thickener, versus how much of the brown powder, which is the filler, to use for the different purposes I'm coming up against in this job. For fiberglass, is it going to be cloth fiberglass or matte fiberglass, and what weight of the fiberglass is? Then I had questions about which way do you lay the fiberglass. Is it going to be perpendicular to the work or on a bias? And then how many layers? As you can guess, I was quite the boatyard pest. For surface preparation, I used a flap disc sander and then a random orbital sander and then some hand sanding. And I took this out to 4 to 6 inches larger than the area that I wanted to actually fill. I filled it with styrofoam, but if I had to do it again, I would use surfboard foam if I could find it. I shaped it with a hot knife, but better would be, once again, a surf form file and maybe finishing that off with sandpaper. For the resins, I used epoxy resins. I used epoxy resin on all the work that I did and mixed it 2 to 1 with the hardener. I used fiberglass cloth here, no matte, and used lightweight stuff and put on 3 or 4 layers. And I laid this on a bias, not perpendicular to the work. The final result was not the greatest looking job in the world, but it worked amazingly well. This is a shot from the top sides, but you can see the condition of the gel coat by how much chalking there is that's rubbed off on my hands. After filling and fairing various scratches and dings, I painted them with a few layers of barrier coat. I added 3 or 4 layers of fiberglass to the tips of the rudders and also the center boards, which had become a little worn and polished from running aground so many times. Then I added the layer of barrier coat, as you can see here. I spent a good deal of time choosing the paint that I was going to use. I looked at 1-part paints, including things like Rust-Oleum, and also Interlux's 1-part paint, and 2-part paints. 2-part paints from Allgrip, Interlux, and QuantumPaint.com. I looked at the ease of application, meaning how much time does it take? Does it have to be sprayed on, or can it be rollered on? What temperature ranges can it be put on in, and also what humidity ranges? How many coats are required? Does it have to be sprayed, or can it be rolled? Does it require tipping? What is the repairability of the paint? I know that I'm going to have to do that at some point. How much local knowledge is there? Are there other boats that I can look at? I finally ended up with Quantum Paint, and I went with this for a number of reasons that were pretty strong. It didn't require sanding between the coats, between the primer coats. It was very easy to repair for damage in the future. It can be rolled on and does not require tipping after rolling. It can be put on in a wide range of temperatures and humidities. And there were 5 other boats in the yard that already had this, and other people that knew how to do it. And the professional painter in the yard was using quantum paint exclusively and allowed me to buy it from her at a reduced price. Of course, you've heard that painting is all about the preparation, and it's 100% true. We sanded the holes with successively finer grades of sandpaper. It's not too hard to do, it just takes a lot of time. This is something that I learned the hard way. It's absolutely mandatory to have the organic pink filters in your respirator. And if you get any of these chemicals in your eyes, it's really painful and harmful. So here I've finished the progressive sanding of the holes, and I'm putting on the first coat of primer. Notice that I have the wrong cartridges in the respirator. I should be using the pink ones, and I've got the gray ones installed. Here it is a couple hours later in the same day, and I'm putting the second coat on. You can see that on the left, and the right is the first coat. And there's no sanding between these coats. I really consider this a 2-person job. You need one person to be mixing the paint and have it within the time frame that it's set to go off, and to bring it to you and to move the paint tray along. Having your helper hold the umbrella to keep you from broiling allows you to really focus on the work. After the primer coat is sanded, then the top coat goes on in the same way that the primer coat went on, meaning that there's no weighting or sanding between the coats. They just go right on with the roller. There is no tipping required. All 3 top coats went on in one day. And this is the result. So there's no sanding or buffing, no wax has been applied or anything like that. This is just as it ends up finished. Quite a few people came by and asked me if I sprayed it. One of the biggest challenges of this job was waiting for the right weather window so that the holes were dry first thing in the morning, so there'd be enough time during the day to get all 3 coats on. At this point, I felt quite a bit more confident in tackling the work above the rub rail. My theory as to why the gel coat cracks so much on the top sides, but hardly any on the holes, is because of differential shrinking and the fact that the gel coat is simply too thick. So I think that all the work that you can see here of me routing out the cracks and then trying to fill them and sand them and fill them and sand them and fill them again was really mostly wasted effort. I could have done better simply by sanding the surfaces down until I got something smooth and then just doing 1 layer of fill. This is a couple shots showing the work in progress in the cockpit, including the floor where you can see the before and after. We repainted all the gel coat on the interior too. It was beige and we painted it snow white, the same as the exterior. It was quite a bit easier because there was no real surface prep involved other than just scuffing the surface and wiping it clean, and then applying 2 or 3 coats. The vinyl on the interior and the headliners was in rough shape, and we found that using vinyl paint by Rust-Oleum worked very well. I decided it would be easier to raise the waterline instead of trying to keep it clean. I cleaned and scraped and prepared everything, and then put on 4 gallons of Sherwin-Williams 50% copper. And here's what it looks like from in the water. I'm really pleased with how it came out.